Summer scenes of 2020. Violence through the thick haze of tear gas across at least 100 cities nationally.
Tear gas has been deployed here in Portland.
I covered protests in Portland, which went on for more than 3 months straight. A year later, protesters described being exposed to tear gas night after night.
It was very hard to breathe. I remember running for blocks, trying to gasp and catch air. And it was everywhere, every block I ran to.
You immediately feel this burning to your face. You immediately start coughing and throwing up. You couldn't eat for several days.
Tear gas is banned in most aspects of warfare, but fair game for most police departments across America. Why? Greg Kafori represents someone who was gassed during last summer's protests in Portland.
Police use chemicals with reckless abandon. Nobody seems to know much about them. What are the short-term health effects? What are the long-term health effects? It's, it's a mystery, and learning about it is not easy.
When it comes to crowd control, tear gas is easy to deploy and often effective. But after the crowds disperse, there's limited information on how it affects the people who were exposed.
It's difficult to set up lab environments to test this, to expose people to tear gas, and to then measure and see what's happening to them, because you're exposing people to something that's potentially harmful.
Women like Demetria and Simona experienced new and intense changes in their bodies that coincided with the protests.
It got to the point where we were having 3 periods a month. 3 periods a month? Not just for 1 month. That was for 6 months.
My moon just, and it wasn't even my time yet. It just flooded me. So we had to come home. I had to change my clothes.
Simona says she didn't know she was pregnant. She had gone to the hospital for a hand injury after she says an officer threw her to the ground at a protest.
And then they did the ultrasound, and she told me it was already too late, and I was losing the baby. So I didn't even get a chance to, really just love on my baby or even get to really accept that this life was growing on me before they stole it from me.
The women assumed at the time their medical issues were linked to the tear gas exposure. But until this summer, there weren't any medical studies linking issues with women's reproductive systems and tear gas. The most extensive studies were conducted by the U.S. military on mainly male subjects during training exercises and who were generally healthier than the average person. Then, this spring, a new study released. Dr. Britta Torgrimsen-Ohario led this Kaiser Permanente study, which found that of more than 1,600 people who potentially menstruate and who had been exposed to tear gas in Portland last summer, more than half reported abnormal menstrual cycles.
The level of the side effects that people were experiencing caused them to go seek health care. They would not have otherwise been seeking care for these things.
Researchers also found a potential dose response, which connects the level of impact to the frequency that people experience tear gas.
The more times that people were exposed, the greater their health impacts were and the more extreme that they were.
CDC guidance on effects of riot control agents, or tear gas, advises that the irritation often experienced is temporary. But Dr. Torgrimsen-Ohario says that's not what she found in her study.
We are now hearing that some of these impacts, particularly in the menstrual cycle, are continuing on and on. So now we're months and months away, potentially even a year away.
The study also acknowledged that stress and anxiety levels could have been a contributing factor to the health impacts. But tear gas didn't just affect people who were actively protesting. It seeped into homes, like Elijah Warren's.
I heard the screams coming from inside my house. I witnessed my son and his friends frantically trying to wash their eyes out in the sink, and my son's dog in the cage just going crazy trying to escape out the cage. As soon as I opened the door, my eyes began to burn, and then that's when I realized that there was some type of chemical agent filling up our house.
We reached out to 2 of the biggest tear gas manufacturers in the U.S. for comment, but did not receive any responses. Portland's mayor has since banned the use of tear gas for crowd control, calling for, quote, something different. We asked Portland's police for comment on their use of tear gas and negative health effects. They referred us to their new policy, which encourages, quote, crowd management ahead of crowd control, but allows police to, quote, adjust their tactical response if a disturbance escalates. But while police departments across the country worked on reforms around use of force over the last year, bans on tear gas didn't stick. In the states that did introduce bills, concessions were made so that tear gas is still an option. In Massachusetts, tear gas can be used only after de-escalation tactics have been attempted. And in Michigan, the state's Republican judiciary chair said a ban would, quote, hamstring police. At the national level, the House Committee on Oversight and Reform opened an investigation. They're asking tear gas companies to submit a list of their U.S. customers, a description of safety testing performed, and internal documents relating to any negative health effects. And DHS says it has begun a review of its policies and training related to use of force. While tear gas no longer hangs in the air this summer, questions around its safety still linger, as does the hurt for some who breathed it.
All I see is pain. All I feel is pain. And I want that to stop. I want it to stop for the community.